Hello, this is a homily for the 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time. As I've said before, the Sundays of Ordinary Time, at least the readings, refer to different aspects of our faith so that we can make have a fuller worldview of what it means to be a Catholic, what it means to live as a faithful person in this world. We need these concepts in our head so that we can operate from them in helping the world to realize the goodness of God. Today, the readings are rather blunt. They are about death. Death is not a topic that we particularly like to talk about. That's understandable. We do enjoy life, and we need a faith perspective on death. So the readings today were chosen with that in mind. Now, in the Old Testament, particularly the later part of the Old Testament, you have what is known as the martyr literature, and this includes the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, Daniel 12:2, we have many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And we will hear more about that, obviously, on the Feast of Christ the King, with which we end the liturgical year. But today's readings pick up the theme of death using, first of all, a piece of the Book of Wisdom. God did not make death, very first line, nor does he rejoice in the destruction of the living. So that should calm our fears about God somehow having a hand in tragedies around us. And we know we can feel a natural impulse to blame God, but really and truly we're looking in the wrong place. God has designed the whole of creation so that things exist and creatures and human beings live. The creatures of the world are wholesome, the reading says. There's not a destructive drug among them, using the word drug here to mean a power, nor any domain of the netherworld on earth. For God formed man to be imperishable. And this is where the connection comes in. The image of his own nature he made him. But by the envy, now we're getting the explanation. The envy of the devil, don't forget, a creature, a fallen angel. Death entered the world, and they who belong to his company experience it. So we have this crisp, it's only a matter of 10 lines, a crisp explanation of what God wishes for us and why people die. And this is very blunt. It's not warming us up or preparing us in any way for understanding death. It simply says, look, this is the way it is. God did not make death. So we have that confidence, even in the Old Testament, that death is not something that is meant to be. Only evil has brought it. And again, we can't ascribe evil to our evil, but simply the evil that runs loose in the world. The writer of the Book of Wisdom talks about the envy of the devil. So, and we have mentioned this before, that the devil is somehow the Lord of this earth, the strong man in whose house we live. The other part of the Old Testament that we read today is Psalm 30. And here is a very light, very joyful reflection on the intimacy that the psalmist has with God. as we saw in the book of Wisdom, he fashioned all things that they might have being. This being is in relation to God, otherwise we wouldn't exist. And the psalmist says, I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. He is very confident. You have drawn me clear. You have not let my enemies rejoice over me. You brought me up from the nether world. After all, death was a major feature of life in the Old Testament. These inspired writings from the Old Testament bring the proper understanding to the fore, even in the time of the Old Testament. So then you changed my mourning into dancing. O Lord, forever will I give you thanks. Now we move to the New Testament, to a piece of St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, and we are celebrating the life in the community. You excel, this is the Corinthian community, small little church in the port town of Corinth, as you excel in every respect, in faith, discourse, knowledge, all earnestness, and in the love we have for you. May you excel in this gracious act at all. Also, first of all, there's kind of an odd sense here. Why has the theme changed? He is celebrating the faith of the people of Corinth, and he is saying that your abundance should apply their needs, their abundance may supply your needs. In terms of our theme, the theme of that we've been introduced to by the psalm, here he's talking about a collection that will be done in Corinth to help the poor people in the city of Jerusalem, where at the time they were suffering great hardship. But there is also another level here, that we are all interconnected, and Paul is explaining this as the true nature of the church, that there isn't one community here, one community there, and they have no interest in each other. Spiritually, we are all bonded together. And how I would read this in terms of the other readings is to say that just as the individual psalmist says, forever will I give you thanks, he's implying that he can pray for his own life, and that by extension then can be applied to people right across all the communities of the church. We will pray for each other's future life. We will pray for each other's hope in the next world. After St. Paul, we hear a piece of Mark chapter 5, and here you have Jesus essentially solving two tragedies. One is the synagogue official, Jairus, whose daughter is at the point of death. He went off, and we are going to pick up that story shortly, but basically he raises her from this. She actually dies while he's trying to get there. He raises her from the dead, and then while he's going to Jairus' house, there was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years, who had suffered greatly. She heard about Jesus, and she said to herself, if I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured. Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction, and Jesus turns round. He's in a crowd, so people are kind of surprised that he even says, who has touched my clothes? But he looks around, and the woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction. Then we come to the raising of Jairus' daughter from the dead. We have two events where Jesus intervenes dramatically in the life of suffering of this Syrophoenician woman, and then also of Jairus' daughter. And of course, not only was she suffering, but her whole family was grieving at the loss of their daughter. And he steps into both of those situations, and because of the faith of the woman, he heals her, and because of the faith of the family, he heals the little girl. In both cases, we are seeing the New Testament fact. And the New Testament fact is Jesus makes the difference. Nothing from what we've heard of the Old Testament, including what we heard from that little quote from Daniel 12 that I gave you, nothing of that has changed. There is this positive sense that God does not wish us to die. But he inserted himself into history in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the new fact, the new historical fact in the world. And because of Jesus Christ, this power of rising from the dead, which will again gain much more meaning at the end of his life, when resurrection doesn't simply mean being resuscitated, it means actually, literally, rising from the dead into glorious life. All of that we're going to be taught by the life experience of Jesus. And here we are kind of halfway along the journey, following with Jesus, seeing his power and seeing the effect that faith has. It's as if what the psalmist was claiming in his psalm has now been made concrete, made real in Jesus, so that if we have faith in Jesus Christ, we will rise from the dead. Now, of course, everything else follows, judgment and all the rest of it, but at least we can rejoice in the fact that death is not the end. And that's crucial, because a lot of what we do in the world is somehow shaded over or pushed in a new direction by our sense of, oh, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I need to put my name on a building. I need to produce a body of work that's going to live after me. I need to have grandchildren, etc., etc., etc. All not terribly evil goals in any way. They have lots of positive meaning in them. But the point of the matter is, we're not just going to disappear at the end of life. This world is, as somebody said, just the antechamber to the great space of eternity. And so there is a massive amount that we have to appreciate. Locked in as we are in this material world, thinking that everything is so limited and small, and in fact this is only the front door. Our life on this earth is only the front door to the great life of eternity. Let us rejoice and celebrate that. Thank you.